What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Now, we're still within a little bit of ways from this year's NBA draft, but with the NBA regular season winding down, we are getting closer to this year's NBA draft lottery. So today we're going to be looking at the Toronto Raptors and some players, some picks that they could potentially have for their options wherever they end up actually selecting. Now, before we get into the actual players, the Toronto Raptors currently, at the time of me filming this video, have a record of 24-34. They've been winning some games as of late, but of course the NBA does have a draft lottery, so Masai Ujiri and the Raptors organization and the fan base, for that matter, can have the high hopes of reaching as high as the number one pick. So we're going to go over the guys that I feel are most suited for the Toronto Raptors. Now, sort of over the course of the year, the Raptors, again, have been developing their core. You look at Anunoby, Siakam, Malachi, Flynn, VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr. They have a very, very solid young core, mostly consisting, though, of guards and forwards. So you'd assume entering the draft, or potentially when some money frees up at the end of the year with Lowry and Baynes having expiring contracts, that their main need is potentially a center. So I'll give some potential center picks, but keep in mind, again, they could just end up picking just the best available player going into free agency and picking a center as well. With that being said, the first player that I sort of see as an option for the Toronto Raptors is Cade Jones, the 6'11", 220-pound center who just finished his sophomore year at Texas. Now, Texas had a fantastic year, Cade Jones being one of the major parts of that roster. They won the Big 12 championship, actually, in a very, very competitive year for that conference until getting ousted in the first round of March Madness. But you look at the Raptors' needs again, they need a center. You'd think that's probably, again, the biggest target in the draft. And you look all around potentially where the Raptors could be selecting, and there's not many centers available, which makes Cade Jones one of the main people I think that Masai Ujiri should really be focusing on. In terms of stats-wise, he had a decent year in 2020-21. You're talking 8.8 points per game, 4.8 boards, just under a block per game at 0.9 blocks per game, but a huge statistical jump from his freshman year into his sophomore year. And I think, this is a player who's already very good, but a very, very high ceiling for the Toronto Raptors. He's an explosive athlete, one of the highest motors in terms of the energy that he plays with in all of college basketball, in my opinion, this past season. He's a good ball handler, can beat bigger defenders off the dribble, but it really starts with that extreme athleticism that he has. He can defend 1 through 5 because of it. He can play alongside a center, which allows teams to go with sort of bigger lineups, but then he's also able to hit jump shots. He's really good from mid-range, can shoot the three ball a little bit as well, shot at just under 40% from three last year. And I think you just look at him, he's one of the most intriguing prospects in this entire draft. Tremendous athleticism. Was a good player last year, but I think when you look at him, the ceiling is just up here. I think the Raptors, if you want to fill in the positional needs, this is a guy to do it. If you want to select a center sort of at your range in the first round, but potentially also develop into, a really good 4-5 player, power forward center for the Raptors in the future. Next up, we got another interesting one. It's Keon Johnson, the 6'5", 186-pound shooting guard and small forward who played his freshman year last year at Tennessee. Now, I'm a little bit surprised that Keon Johnson actually declared for the NBA draft. Not that he was bad by any means last year statistically or in terms of the potential that he has. I just think Tennessee overall was a little underwhelming last year, and you look at a player who really, I think, is a top 5 caliber player when you look at the potential that he has, but I think just because, he turns the ball over a bit too much, he's a little too inconsistent in terms of shooting, that he's going to fall back probably right into the Raptors' range right around that 10th pick. But he's got a super, super high ceiling, 2020-2021 season, 11.3 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He's really comparable, in my opinion, to like a smaller version of Jaylen Brown. He's got that same tremendous athleticism, but Keon Johnson also has a very good frame, got a bit of muscle to him as well. He's a good scorer off the dribble, really, really good off motion plays. Again, if he can just get that overall shooting from the free throw line, especially more consistently, I mean, this is a really, really good scorer with a lot of potential on the offensive side of the basketball. He's a good playmaker, good rebounder for his size, also fairly active, really solid, I think, defensively as well, with even more potential over there just because of that athleticism. He's a little smaller than I think what the Raptors would like, only being a shooting guard and small forward at 6'5". But again, I think this comes down to it where you're like, if you're picking 10, you're winning some games, you fall a bit back further in the draft, you pick the best player available, and I think this is the guy you go with. Already proven at the collegiate level, he The SEC wasn't a bad basketball conference last year, so playing some really, really decent competition and some good defensive teams as well when you look at a team, let's say like Alabama. So you're getting a guy who's sort of already proven at the collegiate level, but a really athletic guy with an extremely high ceiling. I think this would be a great pick for the Raptors. When it comes to the Raptors and them potentially, falling back even more and picking at a spot like 10, 11, or 12, I always feel the need to mention Franz Wagner. You look at him and he went to the Michigan Wolverines with such raw potential, but he's really developed into a superstar in my opinion, but still with one of the highest ceilings, I think, in this draft class, at least outside of like the top 5 or 6 players. He's 6'9", 220 pounds, plays small forward and power forward, so you're getting that height from him as well. At 6'9", also comes from a bit of a basketball family. His brother Mo, obviously, in the NBA right now as well. But you look at Franz Wagner, and I've watched him a lot over the course of the past 2 years being a Michigan Wolverines fan, and I've really liked what I've seen. He came to the Wolverines a little bit inconsistent, but he was always a tremendous defender and had the ability to shoot the 3 ball. And then you progress into this year, and sort of a big role for the Wolverines, and he's very active on the defensive side of the ball, definitely hustles. He's cleaned up the consistency a bit, even though he was inconsistent some points in the season, but definitely stepped up in terms of that regard. He's a fantastic shooter, drives to the rim, really good under the basket, but also on the perimeter as well. Shoots very well from the free throw line. So I think, this is a guy that if the Raptors want a two-way player, I think he fits right into the system. 2020, 2021, averaged 12.5 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists. Again, if Franz Wagner, I think, can add a bit more muscle, he's got all the raw potential here. Already proven in one of the best, if not the best conferences in college basketball in the Big Ten, playing some of the best defensive teams in the country night in and night out. And he shows you that he's right up there with the best players. He's one of the better two-way players in terms of being good offensively and defensively that I've ever seen. He's also really, really young. He came from Germany. He was not old at all. I think he's only 19 years old right now. So he's got the age factor as well. He's a bit of a project for the Raptors, but I think when you look at it in terms of potential, again, drafting just the best player available, I think Franz Wagner, if you're picking him like 11, 12-ish area, he's definitely the guy to go. The great thing about the NBA is that you always have the draft lottery, so even if the Raptors do continue to win some games or sit right around that 8 to 10 position, you got a chance to still get the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, which is why in this video we're still going to be touching on Cade Cunningham, essentially the consensus and lock at that number 1 overall pick. But when you're talking about Cade Cunningham, he's really a generational player. You got to get excited about him if you do have a chance to get him. 6'8", 220 pounds, only 19 years old. He's a point guard and shooting guard. Last season for Oklahoma State, 20.1 points per game, 6.2 boards, 3.5 assists. Had a fantastic shooting slash line, 44% from the field, 40% from 3, and about 86% from the free throw line. He was the 4th freshman ever to win Big 12 Player of the Year, won College Basketball Freshman of the Year consensus, first team All-American as well. So he's definitely got the accolades, the stats to prove it. And if you watch college basketball in the later part of the season, you'll know that Oklahoma State had a very good late run, beating a lot of ranked teams. Obviously, Cade Cunningham, being the leading scorer for them, had a very big part. When you look at Cade Cunningham, the first thing that really stands out for you is that size and that strength. He's really got sort of a unique body frame that's really similar to a guy like Luka Doncic, and versatility-wise, very similar to a guy like Ben Simmons, even though he's a better shooter than Ben Simmons, which is pretty scary to think about. He uses that length very well as well, sees over defenders, got a lot of potential on defense because of that length, and could potentially end up guarding like 3-4 positions. He's a bit of an interesting guy in the sense that he's a playmaker, but he's not necessarily going to beat you with any lightning quick dribble moves like a lot of guards that we see at this age sort of do, but he does use that basketball IQ. He's great at sort of creating really, really good angles, getting reads on the defenses, moving around sort of rotations, and he beats you that way, which is really, really impressive. He's got great vision. He's a great live ball passer, sees over defenders. And yeah, he's just an overall really good playmaker in sort of a unique way, which I really love. But he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. I do think he would fit the Raptors, of course. He's a generational player, so even though the Raptors don't necessarily need guards, you obviously would take Cunningham, and the Raptors are more than hoping that they're going to be winning the draft lottery so that he does fall into their positions. But, I mean, I have not been high on a lot of number 1 draft picks in the past. I wasn't high on a guy like Zion, even though he's doing really really well now, but you look at a guy like Cade Cunningham, and I mean, it's really not hard to love this kid's game. He's such a good overall player. He's good on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, plus you've still got that age factor and the potential factor as well. There's so much to love about this kid. Anyways, guys, if you did make it to this point in the video, thank you. Let me know your thoughts on these 4 players, and just overall, who do you want to see the Toronto Raptors draft come the NBA draft in 2021. Now, I did make another one of these videos where I talked about some other players, so you can go on Touchdowns to Home Runs, find that other video. It's a pretty good watch. But anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more coverage just like this, leading up the next couple of months up to the NBA draft. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you again next time.